Are you kind of experiencing some similar things like Cory was saying, or any questions
That's
come to
the
mind for
biggest
Cory?
issue, I think, especially as a female in the PED space, trying to provide accurate information in those brief summaries with such a restricted time period.
And I think the shows where I've known, hey, this is my best, and I was beat by people that were better, those are the ones that I was able to walk away from and be like, okay, like back to work. Versus when I've been awarded when I knew I wasn't at my best, I'm like, that's not like, that's not as rewarding.
It just doesn't taste the same, right? Yeah.
No.
All right, we are live. We started to give away all the secrets to being jacked and fit as a female competitor in the space. And I said, oh, we got to turn on the recording. No, but special guest, Cory, thanks so much for jumping on today. And then I tagged in a little bit more muscular co-host than Mr. Justin Harris with me. So DJ is joining us. So I thought that was appropriate for the topics tonight. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on. Been watching your content for a long time. I know it just seems like you're really helping a lot of people out there. I really like your approach, how you're reading questions through your posts. I think that's really cool to see like actual questions people are sending in. May or may not have to steal that. And I won't call it my own though. We'll give you the credit on it, but I think it's really cool. You know, it's another way, like we've been doing recently some live Q&As, but I got, you know, we'll get into your background and your history, but I guess on that topic, like what kind of inspired you to start doing that? I thought that was pretty unique how you do that.
Thank you. No, thank you so much. And honestly, I think DJ and Joe, y'all can probably both relate to this. No matter how educational the content is and how perfectly organized from a layout perspective, people tend to gravitate towards wanting to know, how does this apply to me? So in what regard, even if you lay it out perfectly, hey, in this setting, here's what you would do step by step, they still want to know. They're still going to follow up with that very specific question. And frankly, I mean, you guys know it's the same 4 questions every week. Like, I mean, it's the same components. And I mean, on some level, it's like, these are reels. They're not intended to be formal education pieces. It's really just a matter of providing clarity.
Sure.
And in this setting for this demographic, I mean, providing a little more information so that the decision making isn't so emotional or unweighted.
Yeah, and it seems to be pretty like captivating. I look at the engagement on them. I mean, have you noticed when you're doing it more like straight from questions and audience, that more people are kind of engaging with that, with the content? Or
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think, so I have a Patreon where it's a private group where individuals, they can get questions answered directly. So every month they can, and I do Q&As, like direct Q&As with them at least 2 times a month, where I'll record longer audio messages. And sometimes those messages will be like, I don't know, 7 to 15 minutes just on one person's question. And I found for those individuals specifically, I mean, the gratitude that comes with really sitting down, diving in and being like, hey, let's weigh out the pros and cons, even though no amount of context that someone provides you in a Q&A is ever enough. I mean,
Sure.
you really should run it by your coach or book a consultation with someone that you trust. So in these cases, when it's just on Instagram, I mean, there is little to no context. And I mean, I kind of see it as a challenge. Like, I mean, okay, well, let me play through every scenario I can think of.
Right.
And here are a multitude of answers. And I don't know, select the one that's closest to you. But I think the engagement has certainly gone up, switching more to that style format. And it honestly makes the production a lot easier, because going in, I mean, like in January, if you saw my videos then, I mean, they were even drier, even more uptight, just because the delivery, I mean, like the information, I'm wanting to stress how serious it is before using certain compounds. And when you go into explaining like, hey, how do I teach someone about metformin? Like, I mean, there's so many avenues you could take within that almost never are you going to answer someone's specific question just guessing. So I think having some specificity going into the videos, I mean, it's helped me a lot as a creator too.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. And I know we're going to get into like your background and a little more, you know, for those people who've been living under a rock and don't know who you are, we'll catch them up to speed really quick. But DJ, just for you, I know you coach people. You've been using TikTok a lot for different content. Are you kind of experiencing some similar things like Cory was saying, or any questions
That's
come to
the
mind for
biggest
Cory?
issue. I think, especially as a female in the PED space, trying to provide accurate information and those brief summaries with such a restricted time period. TikTok videos, the attention span is very short. That's the whole purpose behind the app, as Instagram Reels are the same way. So trying to provide that information, be captivating enough to hold audience attention, but not try and glamorize something and take away from the gravity of the situation or the use of the compound is very difficult. But I love that you have a Patreon where they can ask these questions, get them on your Instagram, get that information, and then get a little more detailed information through your Patreon. That's a really good approach. Do you see a lot of coaching turnover from your Patreon group?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say with the Patreon, the buy-in is already there, which I found to be a really, really big solution to, just getting a higher conversion with coaching. I do initial consultations for all clients, so no one is able to just go buy coaching just off my website, and that it's a screening process. So like part of that does entail understanding, okay, well, is this someone that I really feel like we're going to be a good fit and it's going to be a successful relationship? And sometimes what I find is that even through the Patreon, I'm getting much more time to just see whether or not I'm aligned with a potential client, because they'll be a part of the Patreon for several weeks or even months. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with your background. Like, we've had dialogue, we've had, although virtually, we've had some sort of a relationship form. So I think the Patreon, it's been a good way to provide information for people in a way that doesn't require the same commitment as the one-time consultation or frankly, even signing up for coaching. Because some people, they don't need those weekly check-ins. The accountability from them isn't the missing piece. It really is going to come from them understanding and then having the autonomy to put it in place, verify, hey, my decision-making was correct. Okay, cool. I can move forward with this. And that part in itself, that's a different type of demographic. That's a client that's much more advanced, but to be able to help them without having to design a whole type of service specifically for that individual, that's super, super rewarding.
I think that's
you offer. I'm sorry. Is that something that you offer, like for paid consultations for clients that maybe need that deep dive into the information? They're exploring a cycle, but they don't necessarily want to or have the need to commit to a full coaching program with you?
Yeah. I offer one-time consultations. And frankly, you are paying for an hour for us to review whatever it is you want. It does not have to be PED related. I am actually seeing a big rise in males coming to me who want to have those individual consultations on a semi-frequent basis. So 4 to 6 weeks, get labs done, come back. Hey, here's what I would like to do. Can you tell me your interpretation or what you would do if you were coaching me? Okay, cool. We don't need to check labs for another 6 weeks. I'll come back to you at the next point where I have a series of questions. And I feel like it still allows me to be able to help without being limited by the fact that that individual, they might not need any help with nutrition or training, so ultimately we're being more efficient with the service and both of our times.
Yeah, I want to add a couple things just for the audience out there too. There's really 2 key points I think that they should take away from. And I want to ask you some follow-up questions these, but the one is, how many of you out there that are listening are looking for a coach and maybe it's just a little too easy to sign up, or that, there's not that more thorough intake process to where it gives the coach a reason to say, hey, time out. Like, I'm not the best coach for you, because I know I've, in my experience, it's been sporadic in and out of coaching over the years, but it was so relieving because I was like, you guys know this, right? You're passionate about it. You're good coaches. That's why we have you on. But there's a lot out there where maybe not. I don't know their motives, but it's a little more of a money grab. And it just used to eat me alive. Like, I don't want you walking around out of shape or not at your goals, but you're still paying me, So I think that's That's the first thing. And I think for the other part of our audience, we do have a lot that are coaches or they're new and they're just getting started and they're looking for good ways to build their personal brand. I just think that's another good way, that maybe they have the best of intentions, but what is your screening process? Like, take that away as a coach from this and think about, what am I doing to screen? And then you've mentioned a couple times just in the first, 5 minutes of recording about labs. Like, you can tell from not only your content, but just even early in this conversation, how thorough you are, which leads me to my question, which is, can you talk a little bit about your beginnings, your mentorship, and like what got you to that? Because I talk to a lot of coaches, a lot of good ones. Some, they're on their journey to become a good one, but I feel like you're kind of at the high end of that based on your process, from what I gather. So can you talk a little bit about how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I started competing in 2015. And initially, my desire was to understand the process of bodybuilding. And really within that, I mean, the scope of bikini at the time, the division was a fragment of what it is today. So, I mean, even just immersing myself into different ways that you can better serve yourself as an athlete and clients, that really allowed me to fall in love with not just getting on stage and competing, but understanding the control and the ability to adjust, the cosmetic side of my body and the function. Really, from there, I mean, I was into competing. I mean, I don't want to water that down, but I loved the process. It was never about necessarily winning or the stage. And I mean, to be fair, I did place first at my first show when I was 19, which
Yeah.
is nothing to brag about. It was a milestone for me at the time, but it was more about like, hey, you were self-coached and like you were able to do this in a way that you felt was sustainable, even at that time that prepping can be. And it was a very big personal accomplishment. But that in itself really furthered my desire, my drive to want to understand, okay, what am I doing? And if it's not something that necessarily has to be outsourced to an expert, maybe it's something I can do myself. And I mean, I'm sure we can all agree, like the state of coaching, the standard is frankly not very high. There's a lot of people who are getting by on very poor practices, both business and ethically with their clients. And that was always something on the coaching aspect that I really wanted to foster on my own time. It was never something like, hey, I want to be a coach that makes the most pros or even has the most competitors. It was never about the total volume. It was, I want to be able to make an impact and use this skill that I have, this understanding around the process of, and not just being in a deficit, getting leaner. I mean, that is a small part of it, but the psychosocial that goes into coaching an athlete and knowing how that changes person to person. So really the first 5-6 years of me being in bodybuilding, I did several shows. I liked that process, but I liked going through it. It wasn't necessarily getting on stage that did it for me.
Yeah.
And then getting to the point where I came back into the sport in 2020, I really just made the decision. I'm like, I want to see where I stack up currently. And right now, even in the last 3 years, the division has changed. But in 2020, I came back, did well, did my first national show. I was 1 point away from my pro card. So I was like, dang, like I might be more competitive than I was really, than I really thought I am. So following spring, I won the overall at Junior USA's. And that gave me that push to be like, okay, well, if you're going to be a competitive pro, you do need to understand the performance enhancement side of things. And that's not anything at the time that I was ever educated in. I was not natural, but I was like, I know my weaknesses. I know my limits. Let me outsource this. And that's really where I crossed paths with John Jewett. I actually hired him initially first for my training programming because I knew my training was shit at the time. Like I knew I'm like, my current coach, he would tell me, you're doing everything perfectly. And I'm like, there's no way I'm accidentally doing it all perfectly. I would have more muscle. I wouldn't feel so exhausted at this point in prep and frankly in off season. My training had a lot of room for improvement. And I really didn't want to settle for what I currently was doing, even though from an outward perspective, it was fine. It was very good, actually. So you know, I hired John actually for consultation for lab work. That rolled over into, hey, you know, I have a coach. I'm happy with them. They don't do my training. I do my own
Mm.
training. I would love to outsource this to you. And those 6 months where I was checking in with John and he was giving me corrections and programming feedback, I mean, I feel like I made leaps and bounds as an athlete. And that same idea, I mean, really, I guess that same environment led me to want to coach myself the following season. So I asked Sean, hey, what are your thoughts, you know, now knowing me, just as an individual, knowing how I operate, what are your thoughts about me trying to self-coach this year? Because I think I can do a really good job. I think I can do better than my last season. And I mean, he supported it. He's like, I think it's amazing. I think you have what it takes. I'm more than happy. I would love to be involved as a second eye if that would benefit you, you know? So
Yeah.
I started prepping very soon after that. I mean, I was coaching at this time, but not, I would say I was very passively coaching. I
Mhm.
still don't advertise coaching as if I do it, but at the time I was advertising it even less. And
Mm.
John asked me, you know, hey, well, what are your plans with coaching? Like, is this something you want to take further? I think you can help a lot of people. I think you can make an impact here. I'm going to bring on coaches, and I can't think of anyone better that would be a good fit for the female side of things
Mm.
within J3U, which I had been a part of J3U prior to hiring John. Like my boyfriend and I, we bought it, we enrolled. And I mean, throughout this time, just like getting more and more information and realizing, wow, it's like so many people are doing it wrong, like
Mm.
not even close to right. And
Yeah.
that's on the female side of things. That's just the standard. There's no one questioning it. Yet in bikini, we see this increase in drug use in women
Mm.
who are amateurs, who are virilizing, like to a point that you're like, what is going on? Like, how this girl's done one national show and like she's 20 years old. She sounds completely different.
Right.
And this was happening to a lot of my friends. This was happening to people that, you know, they wouldn't directly say it, but you could just tell. And you could see that, I guess, lack of information and resource for the female athlete out there. So, I mean, like that really pushed me to want to, one, educate myself for my own use, but then to also be like, well, hey, like if this information is out there, we gotta get it out there. Like someone has
Right.
to do it. And I hate how that sounds like I feel like it sounds like I'm such a martyr. It's not that way at all. It's just
Mm.
like these are very serious risks. And
Right.
there's a lot of women who are just accepting them blindly, who are going to continue to take these risks because they don't know that there's a better way to do it. So extremely long-winded answer, but
It's great.
I think that hopefully gives listeners a good synopsis.
I feel
No,
like in a lot of ways you are paving the way, though, because not only are you bringing these issues to light, but you are open about your personal use of PEDs and that there is, you know, a risk mitigation factor, and you are female in a predominantly male-dominated space. I mean, it's at the end of the day, I would say you are paving the way because a lot of females still consider it a taboo subject, whether they're utilizing it, considering use in the future. They aren't necessarily, you know, wanting to reach out. It's hard to find information. You're providing that in multiple ways. And then again, with the Patreon and the availability to, you know, engage in Q&As on Instagram, I think that's huge for the female PED community.
Totally. Thank you. That's very kind. And I appreciate you saying that. I hope it's not long before we see other individuals in the space, other females talk about their use, both good and bad, because I think that's how people learn, is realizing like it's most people's experience with PEDs.
Mm.
They're not starting off doing things correctly. Most people have a little, a logbook going back saying, yep, didn't realize that at the time was not the way to do it. But if we don't talk about it, then everyone just has this idea that, oh no, like if you messed up, okay, well there's no recovering from that. Like why would you try to do things differently?
Hmm. Yeah. Do you find with your clientele, is it primarily competitors, or do you see like a mixture of maybe some applications of either specific supplementation and or pharmacology for like general population clients as well? Or is it just kind of more strictly the competitor clientele?
I would say 50% are active competitors.
Mm.
The other 50% either former or aspiring competitors, but don't really put that weight on actually stepping on stage. But the idea being they want to be treated like competitors. They want
Right.
that attention to detail, which that's a big reason that I don't charge anything different for athletes who are in prep versus lifestyle versus off season. Like you
Mm.
get the same attention to detail. And if you think that a coach, if you think that like you don't deserve your labs to be reviewed just because you're not getting on stage, like that's such bullshit. Like I'm
Sure.
sorry. Like
Right.
you can provide that luxury service because ultimately that is what it is you're combing through someone's life in a very vulnerable part of their life, and you're offering insight, you're offering expertise. And I know some coaches, their design is different, so I don't mean that at all as like a knock if your coach doesn't offer lab work interpretation. I think it's great to understand your limits, but if this is something that you're going to be doing, and if you are the sport, if that's something that you're going to be involved in, you should have someone that you can rely on as a resource.
Mm.
And if it's not your coach, well, then that slot is open. That needs to be deferred to someone else.
Sure. Let me pull this up really quick because I know you're not going to brag about it, but we'll brag for you. So let's see here if I can get my
And you're
share
also in
screen to work
nursing
right.
school, correct?
Yes, I was I was running late because I was taking my final at 12:30, and I was like, "Ooh, okay, traffic in LA is not the friendliest."
It's all good. Let's tackle nursing school for sure in a minute here. But you just had some clients at North Americans, right?
I did, yes.
So tell us a little bit about your clients. So who do we have up here?
Yeah, so this is Tate, and I'm really excited you pulled this up because I'm so proud of her. She got second at her second national show, and she was
Awesome.
actually self-coached before coming to me, which I
Mm.
admire heavily. Given, I mean, exclusively that, but yes, she got 10th at her national show prior to being self-coached. I mean, which is no easy feat. But she came to me, wanting to make improvements, and working with someone like her. I mean, like I've been able to uh, I want to say really see a lot of similarities from a athlete profile, from a psychosocial standpoint, in her, as I do see in myself. A
Mm.
lot of that self-doubt and imposter syndrome that at times can be debilitating, regardless of how you look. I mean, that's something that I think a lot of athletes do struggle with. And if you're not able to manage it, it's going to be something that always holds you back. And I found with Tate that, I mean, that I would find us like on calls like a few weeks out, and I would laugh to myself, and I would tell her, I'd be like, I know exactly what you're feeling. I can understand it. There's nothing I can say that will um, help you see how you look realistically. Like the prep goggles doesn't even cut it. And I remember feeling that way during my last prep, and no matter what John said, I mean, like I had this idea that like more is better. And
Hmm.
frankly, like if you don't have someone in your corner that can see that, who's like, hey, like you don't need a coach to be more neurotic with you and harder on you. Like you really need them to pull back and be like, hey, like there's nothing more you can do. This is best effort,
Yep.
and the outcome, it's out of our hands. Like we've done everything we can to show up and be as prepared as we can be. And I mean, Tate had I don't care how it sounds. She had the best glutes in the show.
Mm.
Like
So
I
that was an
don't
area of
care.
your training that you focused with her though from the previous show. Was that something that was lagging or she was scored down on before?
Yeah. Tate is pretty tall, and
Mm.
she's class G this time. So I mean, I think we're talking like 5'6", 5'6.5", and it takes a lot of density to be
Mm.
competitive. And I mean, at this point, I think she has a very competitive physique. Obviously, there's still room for improvement, but the training and really spending time in that building phase and um, seeing how much size we could put on reasonably, I think that really made the difference. I mean, like her back shot, I don't think I have it up on my page. I meant to put it up, but her transformation is ridiculous. And we're talking about 6 to 7 pounds of tissue. But yeah, how she executed that growth phase, I couldn't be prouder as a coach.
Awesome.
I mean, like, yeah.
And
Is there a game plan for her moving forward from here?
Yeah, we are gonna go to nationals in, believe it's early in December, maybe late November. So we've got about 12 weeks, 12, 13 weeks. And I mean, she talked to Sandy after the show. The girl who beat her, she looked incredible. She did. Her front pose was just gnarly. But I do think that, like, after talking with Sandy, I was very clear that it wasn't a unanimous decision. And I think when you're that close, even though it's not ideal from a timeline standpoint, it still makes sense to push and try to secure that win, just so that looking forward, I mean, she's able to wrap up this season, take the critiques and really see, okay, well, what improvements do we need to make, and then begin to plan for an actual pro season. And I mean, yeah, I think putting a little bit more size on her, sure, it would allow her to come in a little leaner. I don't think conditioning was an issue for her. I mean, she was one of the leaner athletes within her class, while still having a lot of density and a ton of projection to her glutes. So
that's got to be such a tough balance, especially for the smaller, frames of like a lighter, lower weight female athlete, right? That balance between conditioning and some of the, the fullness and things that you're being judged on. So I'm sure that's a challenge, but it sounds like you guys nailed it as close, as tight as you can on this one. So good stuff.
Thank you. Yeah. It's easy. I want to say it's much easier to just come in as conditioned as you can, but I mean, that's not going to be something a lot of athletes can do when they don't have the size. And I mean, her back shot is competitive at the pro level, and that's something I it's a shame. I really wish she was able to do her pro debut at this point, but our debrief after the show was, hey, like, these things happen. The game plan doesn't change. If you had won, we still are looking at how we can improve. So again, like, circling back to being more process oriented, and even showing her, like, hey, the pro card is a small part of this, and you're going to get it. It's not a matter of if. It's not a matter of if you're good enough. You're good enough. It's just sometimes things don't work out the way we're hoping for them to, or we anticipate they're going to. So, we'll go to the next national show and make some improvements and get more information and go from there.
I think just for the audience out there too. So they're, it's on the female side of the sport as well as men, right? Like we someone who a lot of our audience knows really well, John Rivas. So he just competed at North Americans in the super heavyweights, and he won the super heavyweights at the Arnold Amateur, and was just so close to his pro card. It was like a really close call. And then I don't remember if it's third or fourth, so I don't want John to get mad at me. Just drawing a blank off memory, because there's Selby was in it as well as one of Justin's clients, and both those guys just looked phenomenal. And I'm like, how could anyone beat him? It was so close. But it's, same thing. I think if I remember correctly, he told me he's reloading for nationals at the end of the year, just to take that next shot. But you just got to stay in the fight, right? When you're so close.
Yeah.
I know another competitor got her pro card at North Americans. Shannon Seeley trains at my gym, the gym I'm at, and she, I think last year, took second. She was like ready to retire. Then she took second. She's like, I gotta keep going. It was like 8 years in or something. And she's like, I have to get this. So I haven't ran into her yet though, to see if she's still going after that. But yeah, it just, you got to stay in the fight. So I think I still think it's great for people to share those stories, right? When someone's like right there, because when you do great at that state show and then you get your butt kicked at nationals, a lot of people start second guessing. And it's like, well, maybe you just got to put your time in, so just got to put the work in. Right.
And frankly, I mean,
Ah,
it
sorry.
works in your favor to know I don't know. I always, I appreciate people showing up competitive and highlighting my flaws. Like
Sure.
that in itself, that's something that you don't always get. Sometimes you show up and you know it's not your best. And being a part of being in this sport, I mean, like if you rely solely on your placing to determine whether that was your best physique or not,
Right.
ultimately you're going to be very skewed as to what improvements you need to make. And I think the shows where I've known, hey, this is my best, and I was beat by people that were better, those are the ones that I was able to walk away from and be like, okay, like back to work. Versus when I've been awarded when I knew I wasn't at my best, I'm like, that's not like that's not as rewarding.
Yeah,
It's
it just
not
doesn't taste the same, right? Yeah.
no.
Tell us about Cynthia here.
Yeah. So Cynthia, she did incredible. She actually got third in her class of 45 for, oh, I feel like I'm going to mess this up. You might have it. Hold on one second. Oh, no, I'm mixing that up with 40. She competed 45, 40, 35 and open. And Joe, you wouldn't believe it. Like they had those athletes standing up in line, pumping up 45 minutes before they got on stage. So, I mean, like her whole day, bikini for prejudging didn't go on. Gosh, it was so late. It was the last group, last division to hit the stage. And I mean, she went on with masters all the way through open. They had a short break. I mean, maybe an hour and a half, and they had him back up there. And I mean, by the end of it, I was like, dude, like you did so much standing today just backstage, because I told her, I'm like, I don't want you to miss it. And I know she was just as apprehensive to be like, it's not something you kind of roll the dice on, just like hope that you're ready when they call your group. But no, Cynthia, I'm I'm proud of her as well, and for different reasons than Tate. She has competed at nationals before and she's done well, but there were things about her physique that I know she really wanted to work on displaying better this year. And to see those improvements, those side by sides for an athlete to be able to know that, like, hey, like I know this athlete is competent and she can make improvements on her own. Like she's uh, not reliant on me in a lot of ways. She's very, very resourceful. But then to know that, okay, well, hey, we can go in and make significant improvements in just a year after someone who's been competing. I mean, I believe she's been competing like 7 or 8 years. I mean, that just feels really good to be able to give that to someone. And for Cynthia, we know what we need to do. The projection and the density and the glutes. I mean, like it was really competitive. And that's something I think specifically for her, if she wants to take that next step and become a professional, we just need to have more projection. But I
Mm.
mean, the debrief was similar. Hey, let's focus on the things we did right, the things that we can definitely do better. But of course, like everyone goes to win. And when you've spent that much time, uh, working towards a single goal, anything less, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah. No. DJ, did you have any follow-up questions on that as in regards to the
It looks
competing?
like it's been an awesome last few months for you, honestly. And then you had someone kind of sweep up in August as well, right?
Yeah. First time competitor, Cleo. She did incredibly well. She won 3 of her 4 classes that she
And this was
competed
her
in.
first show.
Yeah, yeah,
And do
yeah.
you guys have any? I know September, the end of September and October are obviously very busy for you. I know we'll get into that, but do you have any upcoming any shows with competitors in the next few weeks at all?
Not the next few weeks. The next one will be nationals in December with Tate, and I would like to be there for that. I I'm in nursing school, which we kind of touched on previously. So working out my clinical schedule so that I can do what I need to do for school, not get penalized or have issues there. Fly out to Texas, be there for those days. Right now, our schedules they were still kind of up in the air for December, but it does look like I'm going to be able to be there in person. So that is the next big, I would say, big coaching thing, big coaching event I've got on my agenda.
So have you been able, because you are in school for nursing right now, obviously we know you have some background in clinical blood work analysis, especially as one of the J3U educators. How has nursing have you been able to utilize that and apply that to your coaching methods at all, or has that helped improve anything?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I would say receiving a formal education. I mean, it definitely fills gaps that I think if you haven't been properly trained, it can definitely give you a basis to go off of when we're talking about generally, just no, not a bodybuilding demographic. And I have found that, I mean, like in school, I think actually just being immersed in what I'm doing in bodybuilding has helped more on the school side, because I mean, I haven't needed to refresh as much on endocrine, on lab work. And I mean, that was something that has been pleasantly surprising. But yeah, I think really when it comes to understanding our demographic, I mean, there's still a long way for us to go, I would say, in traditional medicine. So sure, we can pull a lot from what we see being done, and specifically from how medications are prescribed. But it does become tricky when we start seeing where the trend is going, from a provider standpoint, and really with the growth of wellness clinics, providers becoming, well, I guess private practices becoming more comfortable prescribing these drugs, because inadvertently there is a lot of, I would say, re-educating that's going on with my clients or with consults.
So with the fact that you are in this PED space and you have a background in like PED pharmacology, you have that nursing background, are most of your clients that are seeking your services, are they typically enhanced? Are they coming to you for some type of hormone management, or is it kind of just a split 50-50 where you have completely natural athletes and competitors coming to you as well?
It's a pretty good split. I would say majority are enhanced or have a desire to be. It's a lot of individuals who are interested in using enhancements, but they're not as bothered by me suggesting maybe we wait or maybe we do certain things first. I found that most people appreciate that honesty and that clarity, even if maybe they went into it with a completely different idea of what the conversation was going to be. I do have people that come to me and they don't really want to follow a safer use approach. And frankly, there still are lines that I draw around what I'm willing to be involved in, be coached, just because I do know the implications. And at the end of the day, I mean, like I am enabling something. I am giving guidance, and I'm whether I should be or not, which I shouldn't be in this case, I am the call to authority. And that's the thing that to circle back to coaches really finding their right footing with this stuff is, it's okay. It's okay to turn clients down and to just tell them like, hey, that's not my style. And I'm not really comfortable with the approach you want to take. And maybe there is someone out there for you, but what you're asking me to do isn't a good idea. Like black and white, it's not a good idea. So if you want to do it, you're going to have to do it under someone else's guidance. I'm not going to sit by and give you a pat on the back knowing that you're taking unreasonable shortcuts.
And lately, you've been posting a lot about not just the, implying or I guess the implementation of performance enhancing drugs specifically for athletes, but kind of pushing into the wellness aspect as well, because HRT is growing in popularity. We have, wellness clinics popping up left and right. It's now available. Telemedicine. What are you seeing in terms of TRT and like progesterone therapy in women that are utilizing these wellness clinics? Because I'm sure that you're getting a ton of questions in your messages about TRT specifically in female users.
A lot of what I'm seeing is overprescription. Majority, I think I've had 2 people come to me in the last year who have been prescribed under 10 milligrams as a starting point for TRT. And I mean, when you dig into, well, okay, what does this provider want? Like, what is their goal? How are they monitoring your levels? What's the intention behind the timing with the lab work? Do they have plans of escalation? Do they want to titrate you up? Are they willing to titrate you up to a super physiological range? It's pretty discouraging. I personally don't work with the clinic, and I don't want to say that there aren't clinics out there that are doing things correctly. I'm sure there are. It's just a matter of who I'm seeing. A lot of people are working with someone who is trying to correct symptoms without the lab work. And for the female user, I mean, that becomes very slippery. And they're also just listening
Friend of yours?
to what's that?
I'm not sure where that came from. That was like some kind of outside audio. That was interesting.
I hope that's not coming through on mine. I don't know where it would be, but
I don't know if that was DJ's. I just muted her just in case.
cool. Yeah, no, I feel like a lot of the times maybe the intention's good, but sadly from a dosing perspective, it is wildly off from a true starting point. The other thing is I see providers wanting to test for the trough, so the lowest value that the client's sitting at. They're not interested in the peak, which to me is concerning because it's like, yeah, if your lowest point of test, if your serum levels are coming in already over 100 nanograms per deciliter, and that's like a week after your shot, I mean, I get not wanting your client to experience those symptoms, and that's the reason at least I've been given as to why that specific timing of those tests. But yeah, I mean, I think we've got a long way to go. It makes me nervous to see people going to these clinics, giving them that amount of money, and just taking what they're saying blindly because they have a series of letters after their name. I think it ends up hurting the client in the long run.
Apologize for the little delay there. I can probably edit that out, but I'm not sure where that came from. I was making sure the videos were off. Yeah, because it gets kind of follow up to those questions though. I noticed too some of your, I don't know if it was a pharmaceutical or if you were referencing, supplementation, but I know there's different grades of like a DHEA or a 7-keto DHEA or like a Yohimbe, those type of things being used in with a lot of women are using those. I guess if we could kind of unpack that a little bit, we can kick it off with like a Yohimbe type compound being used. What are some of the methods you've seen used or work effectively, and what are some potential risk or reasons for adjusting that when you're kind of getting these questions or working with clients?
Yeah, do you mean in terms of hormone correction as a whole, some of the methods I'm seeing?
Yeah, I think a combination of both, right? Because like I've seen some of that in like a cutting protocol, right? But then also in the other aspects with the just kind of a general health applications as well, or hormone correction, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, typically from providers, I see them just starting with TRT without actually unpacking, hey, is this person experiencing low test because of environmental issues, lifestyle changes? The desire to just prescribe and get them started seems to be pretty high. From a bodybuilding standpoint, I would say the opposite is true. From a coach's standpoint, I see TRT still being something that is very hard to convince coaches it is valuable, and it could actually be the solution rather than just simply a cycle of Anavar here at the tail end of prep.
Mm.
So with a lot of my clients, the focus is, where do you want to take this sport? And if they're not a competitor, okay, where are you now and where do you want to be? And if that's from a symptom standpoint, if that's cosmetically, how do you want to look? I mean, obviously, yes, within reason, there's a lot we can do. But if someone is dealing with very low levels of test that they've been experiencing, regardless of season that they're in, whether they're under a lot of stress, whether they're at a higher body fat, if that's the case, I mean, we might find that we don't have a lot of those preliminary options to trial. There are clients that I have that off the bat, I kind of know, I don't think that TRT is the right answer right now. And that could just be through that screening, looking at, okay, what is their adherence to medication and supplementation like? Do they plan to be in the sport long term? Are they young enough to where maybe, I guess, really age is kind of secondary to that? Are they in a phase that potentially could be corrected through lifestyle modification? And that usually is my first question, if that is possible. And the coach's job is to really figure out what the client's not telling you and what they might not even realize. If you ask a client, well, okay, like, can we try lowering your stress? More often than not, they're gonna be like, no, like I can't do that. You really have to get granular and be like, okay, here's what I want you to do. Here are the actionable items this week. Do these, and then we're gonna work off of there. And a lot of that is subjective data. It's unrealistic to be like, hey, we're gonna get labs done every week for the next 8 weeks. But seeing certain biofeedback, certain markers that are improving, I mean, that can be promising. But I still find that individuals who plan to be in the sport regularly and for a long time, I begin to question. I'm like, okay, well, how does having low test specifically, how is that helping you? How is that hurting you? Let's lay it out together and let's decide what the long-term plan is and if what you're doing currently makes sense. And if even if that is still ambiguous, even if the client doesn't know or if it's unclear, well, there's no rush. But eventually we do have to have that conversation. If someone's going to be competing, is what are you what is the opposition if you're going to be doing something that is going to consistently lower your test and really in that case not just test but all your sex hormones.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
in terms of supplements that we're seeing a lot of women, and I know you've touched base on a few of these as well. I think it is finally becoming more accepted, more common knowledge that, you know, the solution to cutting body fat for females and first-time PED users is not just jumping on Anavar. That's finally a message that I think is widely understood now. But when looking at non-androgenic compounds, which I know you touch base on a lot, with the implementation of things like yohimbe and clenbuterol, what do you see in terms of that as far as usage, maybe outside of contest prep, as well as for lifestyle clients that are wanting to explore these non-androgenic compounds?
I think there can definitely be a rationale for a non-competitor or even a recreational competitor to explore non-androgenic compounds. Ultimately, if the desire is there and it's likely that they're going to do it, whether I say they should or not, I mean, I think that's a reality you kind of have to face as a coach and in some capacity meet them where they're at. I can say, like, when we compare Clen and yohimbine, like I personally don't use yohimbine. I've used it. I didn't love the effects. I felt like it increased anxiety. And I think when we're looking at, you know, what is the mechanism of this drug? Okay, we're enhancing fat loss. Can we do this with Clen? Yes, we can do that. And I personally would rather have someone on a low dose of Clen than have someone who is type A, who is already pretty high strung, maybe struggles managing that internal stress. Ultimately, having them on yohimbine might actually take away from some of that recovery, whether it's from perceived stress or real stress. I think a lot has to go into that individual's design. And then also an understanding around, like, hey, if we're in this phase, are you doing, like, as the coach, I ask, are you doing everything that is needed to reach that goal? Because if you're not, PEDs, they aren't really a part of the equation for me. Like, I don't really want to encourage someone to use PEDs as Band-Aids, even when we're talking about non-androgenic ones.
And growth hormone is something that I know you openly speak about as well. Growth hormone actually has a lot of application, both, you know, whether it's for a competitor or even lifestyle clients for the therapeutic benefits. What are your thoughts on some of the more popular peptides that we're seeing, and why do you think so many women have some negative thoughts around the use of actual growth hormone, but they're so open to the peptides that are now becoming more widely available.
I think it honestly comes from accessibility. I mean, clinics aren't allowed to prescribe growth hormone. That's not something providers can do.
Mm.
I don't want to go as far to say it's illegal, but you're going to wind up in trouble, I believe, if that is a regular part of your practice. And when we look at how often these peptides are prescribed, I mean, I've seen invoices from these larger companies. I mean, you make a lot of money off these peptides, even more than you would sourcing real growth hormone UGL. But with that being said, a lot of the questions I get, I'm sure you get them as well, DJ, is, well, where do I find a source? Like, how do I find UGL growth hormone? It's like, I can't do that. Like, I can't just, that's not how this works. Like, if you have to ask, like, we're not having this conversation. And really, when it comes to these peptides, I mean, I think understanding that you are paying a premium rate for something that is in high demand currently, but specifically from like the muscle building potential, the thing that I think is the biggest drawback is, I mean, like you aren't seeing that same kind of conversion to IGF-1, which, like, for the female athlete, I mean, yes, assuming like you have an anabolic in place and you have the ability to take advantage, I guess, to capitalize on the effects of growth hormone in that capacity, you aren't really going to see that with other peptides. And I mean, like, AOD is one recently I was asked about in a Q&A. I think I posted it on my Patreon, and that's one that the Gillette Health guys talk about. Like, they dove into the studies on this. Like, it's shown to be effective, but in like rabbits, like it's not even been shown to be effective in humans. And that's the other part of it. Is like, okay, well, again, looking at the model of these clinics, I get it. You're incentivized to make money. This is an easy add-on and you don't have something better to offer. So it's an easy sell. I know the pay structure, like how a lot of them are compensated on how many options they give clients. And I think that's where people have to be careful and understand that, like, just because they're offering it doesn't mean it's indicated or it's as effective or it's been shown in research to be effective in humans. So yeah, I guess if you can't get growth hormone, I understand maybe peptides are the way to go, but I just would calibrate your expectations accordingly. But I say the same thing with growth hormone. Like, what do you expect? Like, it's not going to do something magical. It's the same thing with TRT. Like, if you think this is going to prevent you from having any days where you're exhausted, you think your libido is going to be like just through the roof, 365, it's not, but it's going to help improve. And if you go in with those expectations, I mean, you shouldn't be disappointed. But I think the expectations vary greatly person to person.
Well, I think even if it's in a controlled setting, to what you're saying about peptides, I've seen a mixture of some that, to your point, don't seem to translate. They just don't work well. And these were made in a compounding pharmacy under regulation. So I'm not talking about, research products. And there's been some pretty interesting, studies or testing on a lot of the research-based places. None specifically, but the dosing, the sterility, the stability, all those things that are just so far off. It's really a mixed bag from my viewpoint. Again, I don't partake in it a high amount, but people asking. But going back to what you were saying, like, if it's in a controlled setting, to check to see, are you feeling a difference? And then really, the markers changing. Like, I know a lot of the like growth hormone releasing hormones or growth hormone releasing peptides that can turn on your signaling. Is it going to be at the same level as an athlete who's taking, exogenous growth hormone? No. But for someone, maybe it's, if they're outside of that realm or that high level competitor, and that's what they're trying to go for, to your point about tailoring expectations, but they just want to increase their IGF-1. Again, testing it to see, is this actually working? Is my body receiving this signaling? And but I think that would be kind of probably more outside of the competitor world, I would guess, because it's just going to be such a lower impact. And impact on that fitness gym goer or even general population person or former competitor maybe, but related to exogenous growth hormone. It's just, it's completely different. But I will say the one thing I've seen from a safety efficacy standpoint on some of them, again, keyword being some, in a clinical setting is, it's self-regulating because it's only signaling the natural production to ramp up, versus like overloading exogenously. But it's the same thing. Like if you're signaling your natural testosterone, you're still going to have a lid there, right? Of how much you're going to return. You're not going to get like bodybuilder results of exogenous testosterone. It's similar when you compare the two. So I think you said it right, where it's making sure you have the right expectations for what you're doing.
Well, and that goes hand in hand. Are you even in a phase that you can take advantage of what you're taking? And I think like taking certain peptides that are $300 or $400 a month. It's like, are you doing everything else? Like, are you going to even get the most of this, most out of this, even if it works, even if it's enough for you and for your expectations? And I think that's where I see the biggest gap whenever I talk to individuals, whether that be clients or consultations. It's like, you have so much to improve on the back end. Why don't we do that first so that when you're ready to make that jump, you're not disappointed? You're actually going to be able to take advantage of this.
Right. DJ, what other questions did you have just out there with kind of on the female health or things you're seeing with clients?
One of the biggest questions that I get is thyroid hormone, especially because, again, we are seeing people able to treat maybe sluggish thyroid. It doesn't necessarily have to be hypothyroidism specifically. And obviously, we know we manually alter the thyroid axis in a lot of competitors for fat loss phases. Sometimes it's T4, T3, or just cytomel independently. What are you seeing as far as like use of this in your lifestyle clients, and your thoughts on manipulating T3 levels specifically?
It still blows my mind that individuals are prescribed exogenous thyroid hormone indefinitely. It's not something I can say, okay, every person who's taking it shouldn't be taking it. There are certainly individuals who have downregulated thyroids to a point that it could put them at risk for other health complications, for sure. When I see someone that, finished their contest prep, they went to an MP, they went to a clinic, and they're given thyroid hormone to combat their sluggish thyroid post-show. It's like, we got to take a few steps back. Like, yeah, like we knew your thyroid was going to be sluggish, like, and that's okay. Like, it's okay to be like, I want to improve on this, but long term, you're making a commitment to now have this in place, at least maybe in your MP or your provider's eyes indefinitely. And that might not be conducive with the best outcomes for that individual. Typically what I see for individuals who are taking it in a setting where it's not necessarily indicated is they're experiencing those symptoms of hyperthyroidism then. So thinning of the hair, excessive shedding. I do see a lot of individuals who want to have it in place for prep, which I have no problem with. But it's are we using it appropriately in combination with a proper timeline, or are we using it to compensate for a show you just want to do? Like, do you just want to get on stage and you're like, what can we put in that's going to help me get there sooner than I would without it? And I think that's where really highlighting, hey, we can use these tools to create a better look at the end of it, but we still have to work within parameters. We still have to have enough time to get ready. We still have to be in a reasonable enough deficit where we don't have to drive up dietary and training fatigue so high, in addition to systemic fatigue just from these exogenous PEDs. So I don't have a really hard and fast rule around having lifestyle clients use thyroid hormone, but I do find it really concerning when someone is put on it post-show without any kind of context, like just with the provider, just, yeah, you are like, we knew you were hypothyroidism. Like, I didn't need to see labs to know that.
So coming out of a show, especially for competitors that are using, specific compounds to help with cutting, like T3. What do you do as a coach, or what do you typically see and help mitigate in terms of negative rebound coming out of a show? Because of course you do have those down regulations, and if you were taking maybe like a T4, T3, even if it had been compounded for you, still exogenous hormones going into the body. What do you do to help athletes taper off of that and come out of a show in a healthy way?
I mean, best case scenario, plan A is put them in a position so that the end of prep, they're not still racing to lose body fat. They're not still having to have cardio at its peak level the final week in weeks, if they have the ability to. I can say with my client Tate, she was ready 4 weeks out. It gave us a lot of leeway for her coming out of the show. And if we were just transitioning into another build phase, tapering off of certain things, it would make it easier than I'll use myself as an example, going into peak week, doing a lot of cardio, being at very low calories with thyroid hormone in place. It's like you don't have the same lateral mobility. Ideally, you don't have to keep thyroid hormone in place post-show for an extended period of time. But that, if the client is at a point where the deficit that they're in the final week, if it's so vast that even just removing cardio is going to be difficult to then encourage proper adherence. I mean, we might find that like, hey, leaving it in is actually going to do less damage in the long run, even if that is just for a 2-week period where they can recalibrate to what this new phase is going to be like. I would love to say like that's how it goes for everyone and all my clients. Oh, like we go into that final week and like we're able to taper certain aspects down, bring food up. It's just not the case though. A lot of people, they are still rushing the final week. And for those individuals, really the post-show period, for one, it needs to be focused around not getting injured. Realizing that no matter how quickly the scale weight goes up, they are still technically at a low body fat. They are still in a compromised position. And I mean, literally those first 4 weeks, if you don't get injured, okay, like we did a really good job. Like you didn't put yourself in a position where now you're going to have to take extended time off training. Cool. Okay, that's an easy one. Have we brought your food up to a point where you are not so food focused, where you can drop off a little bit of that dietary fatigue? Okay, that helps. That moves us into a position where pulling thyroid hormone out is going to be a little more manageable, because that small amount of a deficit that it was generating for that athlete during contest prep, well, that might be negligible if that individual's food is now to a point where it doesn't bother them to have a couple weeks where we're not continuing to escalate food up. So I think it's something that has to come out. I'm willing to keep it in a little bit longer if that's going to ultimately help the athlete finesse out of the show. But I also realize that like for most people, if food focus is a struggle and if adherence is a struggle, pulling that out might be concerning. It might drive up anxiety because the results are going to shift. It is playing a role in creating that deficit. So I think, again, managing those expectations for the client and encouraging them to accept that like the only way to get to where they need to be, at least for most of the athletes I work with, it's getting you back to a state where you can be productive with your training. And post-show, you're not productive. At that body fat, you're not productive. It's not to say you need to rebound or shoot your weight up super high. It's just, let's get you back to a state where you can actually do something. Because right now, as an athlete, from a functional standpoint, you're pretty useless. You're not in a good position. So again, very long-winded answer on that one, but I hope that.
Yeah, I think that helps. One thing I was thinking about too, when you were talking about coming out of a show, was, do you, from a nutrition standpoint and training standpoint, are you looking at like a rebound phase, kind of like some, open, male competitors would try to take advantage of that post-show rebound, or is there a different approach you're using with female athletes?
I think I think the amount of tissue we're going to see put on for a female athlete, I think it's very small. If they're, I mean, even with enhancements, we're still looking at a very small amount. I almost frame it like, hey, we don't want to see your physique regress. Like, we want to minimize that regression of you looking worse. You're going to look worse because in your head, you're at this very low body fat. You love how a lot of these people love, myself included. I love being lean. And when you see that go, it starts to drive you crazy. So being able to coach an athlete and help them see that, like, hey, there's some good that comes with sacrificing some of that. And really, if the goal is to make improvements, it's going to be a slow process. It's not something I would encourage them to expect us to do quickly. And I think, I don't know, like I have a hard time. I have a hard time buying into that we're going to be able to rebound afterwards, especially in that state. I mean, a lot of that weight gain is going to be attributed to other factors, but is it tissue? Very small amount, I think at best.
Well, I know we were talking a lot about, different, PED protocols, questions you get, things like that. Tell us a little bit about just what you have kind of coming soon. I know you're working on finalizing the release date of an ebook, but can you kind of tell the audience out there about a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I actually have a seminar here in 2 weeks in Utah for the Stage Ready Bikini Seminar, where I will be giving an hour-long segment on performance-enhancing drugs, which is a pretty big deal because that's our first, like, it's not an NPC sponsored, but it is an NPC event. It's a bikini event. And the chairman of Utah, Steve, he asked me to come out and speak on this and really just highlight some of the areas I think need more attention. So if listeners are interested in something like that, it's going to be a full day. I mean, you've got Ashley Kay, Adam Bonilla, Amy Delgado. You've got a lot of top pros coming in, speaking on all aspects of everything bikini. But I will be giving a segment specifically on performance-enhancing drugs. So that is that's pretty exciting. And then after that, I will be launching a full ebook. Right now, the date is still tentative, but that's going to be something that I'll have more details for the listeners here soon. But that is going to be really the idea being, it's going to be your introduction to understanding the state of female PED use for this demographic. And I try to specify, like, this is not inclusive to divisions that necessarily accept a higher risk. I don't want to speak for them and I don't want to exclude them, but I think oftentimes, like, on social media, these videos, they can get taken out of context and people can think I'm making videos about male cycles or female women's physique cycles. And it's like, I'm trying to hit one demographic and even within that, it's very difficult, so hopefully, if that's something that individuals are looking for, just to gain a further understanding, something in hard format, stay tuned for. But I do have a free version, a very shortened version on my website. So if you go to that, just sign up for my newsletter and you will get the link to that free download.
Awesome. And for everybody out there, just coryfit.com. So you can check out the site, a lot of good information on there. All your programs, like you mentioned, about your coaching, some of the questions you do on your social media channels. And then you were mentioning the event. So just to encourage everybody at, Cory _fit. So here's your, I believe your post about is this the upcoming event you're referencing?
That's actually the ebook, but
that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't think I have anything on my website about the seminar, but let's say,
you know what? I apologize. I switched screens and I didn't follow me. So here it is. Here we go. This is what I was referencing. This one.
There we go.
That's what you have coming up for the event. And then the website and that's where you're going to release the ebook too, right? Is the website? Is that?
Yep, that's correct. But the event is September 23rd out in Utah. It's about an hour out of Salt Lake City at the Bucked Up headquarters. So that will be exciting if you were in the area or you were local and you want to come check that out. You can find tickets through the link in my bio.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to hop on with us tonight. It was, definitely a lot of good information. Encourage our listeners to check out your content on all the platforms. DJ as well. Thanks for jumping on and adding in your questions and expertise, things from your angle. So I think it's going to add a lot of value for our audience out there, or even right now it's more heavy male audience, but we know, a lot of our male audience are maybe coaching friends, girlfriends, significant others, things of that nature. They're trying to help them. So I think it still just gives some content and or some experts that they could reach out to and partner with if they're trying to give someone, close to them some assistance. So thanks again for coming out. But just lastly, any other places that they can find you, Cory, out there for more information?
I'm on all platforms at Cory_fit. I've got my Patreon, same _ handle, YouTube Cory_fit. And yeah, stay tuned. A lot of the content that's out is short form, but I think I'll have some longer form content coming soon.
Awesome. And DJ, how about you? Just and we'll have some stuff in the show notes and things too, but where can people find you?
I'll have my links posted, but I'm just Coach DJ Vanilla Face on pretty much all platforms.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, for everybody out there, just a reminder, if you watch this on video, we are on all audio platforms as well. And thanks again for tuning in and supporting the show. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you. Have a good night.